I'm making a video where I talk about stuff I find interesting, and right now I'm talking about So what are bubble maps? They're a small part of the game design process really. They're there to show how intense each area of a level is. And quickly to clarify, game design does not actually refer to making every part of the game. It's not the actual programming, the modelling, or the animating, anything like that. Game design is the planning of those things, as well as the pre-production and prototyping of a game. In game design, you're doing two main things. Prototyping different elements of the game. This could be how the player moves, this could be a mechanic, this could be how the level works, things like that. Secondly, you're making what's called a game design document. This is where you essentially document and detail every aspect of your game. You would start with a high concept that includes an overview of what your game is about, the general gameplay, mechanics, and story if you do have one. The rest of the document details everything about the game, such as controls, a more in-depth view about all the player's mechanics, mood boards, inspirations, enemy statistic charts, and where bubble maps come into play is the beginning stages of level design. Bubble maps are not a requirement of a game design document, and game design documents are not a requirement to make a game. They are there to plan out and keep everyone involved with the game's production informed and up to date on each aspect of the game. I personally think that bubble maps are an easy and simple way to begin to plan out what your next level could be. I also wanted to show you how, even though nobody outside of the production team will really see a bubble map, they still have a big impact on the game's final form. Once you know how a bubble map works, you might start to look at the games you play slightly differently. This is what a bubble map might look like. There's a little bit to break down here, so firstly we've got the bubbles. Each of these bubbles represents a main or an important area that the player is going to be spending a decent amount of time in. This is not meant to represent a corridor or a short connecting room or an area where the player is going to be travelling through very quickly and spend a very minimal amount of time in. Next, we have the different sizes in bubbles. The sizes are there to represent how intense each of those areas actually is. A small bubble means it's low intensity, a high bubble means it's high intensity. For example, in a game like Doom, an area that is low intensity would be an area that has very few enemies. Maybe it has resupplies like a new weapon, armor, health, that sort of thing. An area that's high intensity might be an area where you introduce a new enemy type. Maybe there's lots of different enemies that are difficult to get through, or could be a boss. If you have a puzzle game, generally there aren't going to be many enemies in a puzzle game. So a high intensity area would be one where it's a very difficult puzzle. A low intensity area would be an area that has maybe a new mechanic introduced, or it's a very easy puzzle to solve. Lastly, there are the letters. These don't matter that much when first making a bubble map. They become more important a bit later on. Just know that they do not have to go from A to F, they could go from A to C or A to K. It goes as long as your level goes. The gameplay is from World War Z, and I think it demonstrates my point quite well. Even though we can't see any bubble maps for this game, it is very easy to see how you could make bubble maps for this game, and what a bubble map could eventually become when turned into a playable game. You can see on screen I have made a small bubble map of this level, as well as an icon to represent where I am, as an example. As the video goes on, you can see what different areas of intensity might look like, as well as how far through the level I am. Once you have figured out generally how intense each area of your level is going to be, then you can start adding some information about each of those areas. And this is where the letters come back into play. Going back to the example, if I was making this bubble map for a separate level in World War Z, then I could write about how Section A has a cinematic introduction for the setting. Maybe Section B slightly advances the story of the level. There are more zombies and there are a few side explorable areas for the player to find weapons and supplies. One great advantage of bubble maps is their flexibility. If you decide that partway through making a bubble map you want to drastically change how the level is structured, it's really easy. You can do things like increase the size of bubbles, change them around, add or take away segments, change the description of areas, whatever you want to do really, you can do it as you haven't committed to making much. It is important to remember, bubble maps are not meant for every type of game. It's a lot more challenging to make a clear bubble map for a competitive shooter like CSGO, as you don't really advance through the level. You're given a map, and it is up to the players to decide how to approach that map each round. Bubble maps are best used in games that have completable levels where the player is actually progressing through them, so don't expect every game to have a bubble map. Hopefully, you can see how you could start laying down the foundations for a new level in a few quick steps. There's a lot more you can do with bubble maps. Depending on the type of game you have, one way to take them further would be making them for different aspects of your level. You could add more maps for the cinematic intensity of your level. Section A might be a large cinematic cutscene, but it might start the level with a very safe, easy area for the player to explore. Whereas Section E might not have any cinematic aspects, but it could also just be a small area to resupply and get more health. A cinematic bubble map might look like this. If you want to, you can take this even further and break down a cinematic map into an audio and visual map. However, this would be done much further into the game design process, maybe when you have key designs and features of the level planned. So with all this in mind, let's see what we could do to create a more detailed bubble map for the level Setting Sun. What I have here could already work as a bubble map. There are the intensity levels, and there's a brief description of what each area could involve. However, we can take this a bit further with more detail, as we could add small other bubbles onto the existing bubbles that include significant side areas. For example, I know that in the first section of this map there are two little extra areas. The first one has a weapon pickup, and the second one has a supply bag, so I can mark these on my bubble map with A1 and A2. Now, I wouldn't label these with A, B and C because they are not mandatory areas you have to go through. They are little side areas that contain significant pickups or items or power-ups, whatever it might be for your game. Because I've also labelled these, I can then go to my details area and I can write a little bit about each section. So you can start to see how you would build up these bubble maps to make a more detailed map. Something to keep in mind, you really don't have to go too overboard with the details, just include the main stuff. There does come a point where you have to move away from just planning and actually get into the concept art or the pixel art of your map, or maybe the block out stage. So what you can do next is, you can actually just completely change the way the bubble map works. You can take the individual bubbles and lay them out in a way that you think you might want your map to eventually become. So as you can see how I'm shaping it in the way that the Setting Sun level actually is laid out. This was actually a task I did a few years ago for some coursework. I included even more detail with icons and a key to show what items and events would be available in each area. Using this example, I just want to show you how this bubble map actually applies to the real level.
Team 4, this is Rescue Leader. Where the hell are you?
Sweeping the last sector. 10 minutes.
Negative. Get to the evac bus. We need escort
So heading
now.
over to the game, you can see the player starts in a very safe area. I've marked that as
There
A
could
on the
still be
bubble map.
people in these houses.
We got him.
I see one.
Moving forward, you come across your first zombies, and the road splits ahead, which leads to A2. Further up the main road, there is a heavy weapon behind a van. That's marked as A1.
This will.
This path on the right leads to A2 where the supplies are.
Let's see. This.
Moving further on, to the left we can see the original area we were in, and to the right we can see the area marked B across the bridge. There's a small path heading up a hill, leading to some supplies. This is marked B1 on the map.
I can work with this.
Heading back to the original path, we walk by a bridge we could have crossed. This area has some supplies or zombies that could spawn, and is marked B2 on the map. Heading further on, we drop down into a tunnel area. This area has some supplies as well as a couple secrets and is marked C on the map.
Moving to the tunnel. You're too far. We can't.
After defeating some zombies, we come across some supplies. Both sides of the road also have extra supplies or weapons on them. This is marked C1 and C2 on the map.
Supply bag on the ground. You don't stand a chance.
After the bus gets stuck, we have a short amount of time to set up defences and gather weapons for our incoming horde. This is marked D and D1 on the
Blowing the
map.
door. Silence. They don't know we are here.
Lower the barriers.
Supply back here.
After defeating the swarm, we have to escort the bus a little bit further, moving towards E on the map.
I have 34 people on this bus.
Western gates are under men and taking a beating. If infected get through there, they have a straight shot to the port.
After walking through E, we come across a small suburbs area. This place has lots of small secrets where we can find supplies, weapons, and areas to breach. These are marked E1, 2, 3, and 4.
What's in here?
Stay close. Hide them.
Enemy explosives!
Finally, we come to the last area on the map. This is a large open area where we have a few minutes to prepare defences against a large swarm of zombies. The areas marked F1, 2, 3 and 4 are all the areas where you gather your supplies and defences from.
I hope this holds. They'll be like flies in a web. Cut them down!
All that practice paid off.
Locked and loaded!
We cannot let them over the gate.
Command, I think we are clear.
I hope you found this video interesting and thank you very much for watching.
On our way.
Team 4, this is Rescue Leader. We'll see you on the ship.
Roger that, Rescue Leader.